With summer right around the corner, we have some things to look forward to. Hot days, cool nights, carnivals hopefully not similar to the one in tonight's video. A lot of memories to be had. Tonight I will be telling 3 stories. A huge thank you to the writers. Remember, you can send in your own story to rylhstories@gmail.com. If you enjoy the video, a like and a comment is always appreciated. Subscribing if you're new is as well. Enjoy the video. And as always, I hope you all have a great night. Let's just say my life sucks right now. I lost my job a week ago, and my girlfriend left me for some jerk online the week before that. And now, I'm trapped inside my bedroom because there is a machete-wielding psychopath outside my door. He's been there for 18 hours now, yet he hasn't broken down my door. I'm 100% certain he is waiting for me to surrender. I also can't escape on my own or call for help. My phone is in the living room because I, being the low IQ meat sack I am, left it charging in there earlier yesterday while I was watching TV. I also have no landline in my room because I never decided to install one in there. And as the cherry on top, I have no window in my own bedroom. Don't ask me how. I didn't build this house. I've tried reaching my friends and family on my computer through Skype, Discord, email, etc., but no one has responded. How no one has acknowledged my messages, I don't know. This situation and the events before it are so mind-boggling to me. It's so unbelievable, yet it's true. Let me explain how I ended up like this. I have loved video games since I was a young child. I used to play for enjoyment, but now I use it as a coping mechanism. I don't like to drink. So this is my solution for that. It may seem weird for a guy in his 20s to play video games as a way to cope with his woes, but I do so because it gives me a temporary escape from reality. It's like when you are reading a good book, or watching a movie. Entertainment helps you enter a fictional realm in your mind, allowing you a short reprieve from real-life struggles. That's basically how video games were for me. My favorite genre of games has always been horror. That, in my opinion, gave the best escape for me. I was put into a scary situation whenever I played, making me forget about the real world since I had to focus on the game, in order to not get scared and or die. I've also always loved getting the adrenaline rush that came with being scared. So anyways, last night, I was browsing through Steam to see what new games were out. My bank account was dwindled since I lost my job, and while it still has enough money to get by, I have to live off the cheap stuff in order to survive. So for now, I am stuck playing games that are either free or extremely cheap. I was scrolling through the list of games when my eyes landed on a game I had never heard of before. It was called Escape at All Costs. It had a small description and I skimmed over it. The gist of it was this. Your car is broken down and your phone is dead. You are stranded in the woods in the middle of the night. You hear a man yell to you. You turn and see a large man with a machete in his hands. He isn't here to help you. He is here to make you his next victim. Escape at all costs. I'll be honest, it sounded really stupid. Its concept was so cliche that I came very close to buying a better game for $4.99. However, I decided to download it and try it. It was free after all. There's no harm in trying it. I did notice that there were no reviews of the game, but I glossed over it. It was probably a recently released game that hadn't gotten much attention yet. The first weird occurrence happened almost immediately. When the game started up, instead of a main menu or flashes on the screen showing the title or name of the developers, the game just started right up. I have never played a game where there wasn't a main menu startup. It was odd, but I just kind of ignored it. It started with a brief cutscene of a man, in first-person mode, driving his car down a dirt road in the middle of the woods at night. His car then makes noises, and slowly comes to a halt. He gets out of his car and pops the hood. As he is inspecting the engine, a "hey" can be heard in the background. The character turns to his right and sees a man holding, as expected, a machete. The killer charges him, swinging his machete but missing. The character then turns and runs in the opposite direction. I want to point out that the first-person view was really wonky. It was as if someone was filming with a GoPro strapped to their head. Also, it looked like actual real-life footage. The main character, the one whose eyes I was viewing out of, had real-looking features. It didn't look computer-generated. I know I am describing it weird, but it was something along those lines. After the cutscene, I am then given control of the character. The controls were given to me in white font in the upper section of the screen. After that, an instruction covered the center of the screen for a few seconds. In large, red letters, it read, "Escape at all costs." Alright, challenge accepted. I initially ran around the map for a good 10 minutes. I was hoping I would have some more insight on where to go, or what I needed to do in order to escape. I thought that maybe there were more details in the pause menu, so I tried to pause the game, except no key brought up a pause menu. That's odd, I thought to myself. I then tried to find a way to quit the game, thinking that the pause menu not coming up could be a glitch. I hit the escape key, only for nothing to happen. I then tried hitting Ctrl-Alt-Delete, and then a red-lettered message popped up again in the center of the screen. That is not how you escape. Don't try that again, or you'll surely regret it. Okay. This developer had way too much fun designing this game. It was creepy, sure, but also a smart move in a sense. It did add to the horror effect of it, in my opinion. Why not make it scarier by making the player actually try and complete the game, or die trying? With that in mind, I decided to trudge forward and beat the game. I ran around in circles for at least another 20 minutes, looking for anything that could help progress the game. After a few more minutes, I found a tree lying on its side. As I walked closer toward it, I saw something etched into the wood of the trunk. It was a heart, and within it were two names engraved into the wood. It read, Jessica and Terrence. When I saw that, I sat up in my chair and stared in awe for a solid minute. Let me explain why. I live in a small cabin-like house on the outskirts of town, since I didn't want to live in a crummy apartment. Sadly, it was the only thing within my budget. I'm surrounded by trees, and my closest neighbor is a fifth of a mile down the street. Needless to say, I am almost completely isolated. There was a tree knocked down not long ago. I found it while I was jogging out in the woods a month or two ago. I don't know how it fell down, but I do know that there was an inscription on it. It was a heart with the names Jessica and Terrence contained within. I mean, what are the chances of that? I thought it was a coincidence, but the shape of the hearts and the way the names were inscribed were identical to the ones in the game. But as I looked around, I realized the layout looked familiar. Too familiar. The number of bushes here, the number of trees there, and even a small pond nearby. And then it hit me. These are the woods I live in. At first I thought that was awesome. The game developers used the woods as a model for their game. That was pretty cool, since my town has literally nothing going on 99% of the time. Wait, if this is the woods, then does that mean my house is here, in the game? Screw it, might as well look and see if it is. I made the character sprint several hundred yards, and after a couple of minutes, I saw an object in the distance. It was a house, my house to be precise. This is seriously so cool. I thought as I moved the character closer to the house, my house is in a video game, how cool is that? The character reached the front door of my house, and finally, a new instruction popped up. Press K to kick open door. I obeyed. Not even a millisecond later, I heard a massive bang coming from my front door. I darted out of my bedroom and ran down the hall to my front door. The door was being kicked in, and was already close to falling off its hinges. There were only 2 or 3 bangs before I reached the door, so whoever was kicking down my door must have been extremely strong. I ran back to my room and locked the door. The character on screen was still kicking in the door, even though I had stopped pressing K. I tried to power off my computer. When I hit the power button, a new message popped up. You can't escape us. The door finally broke down, and the character panned the front room. What I saw made me want to vomit. The whole room was set as exactly as to how it is set now. Every picture frame, piece of furniture, even my shoes were set exactly as they are in real life. Even worse, the pictures in the frames were the same pictures in real life. Pictures of my parents, my ex, they were all there. I was then jump scared by the killer's face filling the screen. The killer threw my character to the ground and then mercilessly slashed him to death. I heard the screams of the character, but not from my speakers. They were coming from outside of my bedroom. The screen went black, and a final message popped up before the game crashed and exited back to desktop. It simply read, "He could not escape at all costs. Can you, Jordan? That's what happened last night. I've been in here for about 18 hours now. The scariest part about all of this, though, is that when I looked up this game online, nothing came up. No reviews, no YouTube videos, nothing. It didn't even come up on a Steam search. It's as if the game immediately disappeared the moment I downloaded it. How could this be possible? How could someone have broken into my house the second I pressed K, then was murdered the same time as on screen? How did it know the layout of the inside of my house, and even my name? That is what I've been trying to understand for the last 18 hours. The killer, or whatever that thing is still in my house. It's just waiting for me to leave. It hasn't even spoken at all. It has just made grunting and moaning type sounds. If someone I know is reading this, please send help. I have to escape at all costs. The circus just appeared one day, perched in the parking lot behind the mall. Hand-painted signs cropped up overnight like gaudy weeds, displaying sneering clowns and roaring tigers. The largest circus on earth, one night only. Flyers covered the walls at school, were stuffed into every mailbox. I left tire streaks through a pile of them as Gaz and I raced to the beach. Wherever I looked, brightly colored papers merged with the dead leaves swirling through the air. Printed with a portrait of a cheerful-looking man wearing a goofy top hat. Well, Sean, this might be your best shot. Gaz cackled as our bikes hit sand, and we began to slow down. How are your cartwheels? I kicked some sand up at him, which only made him laugh harder. Gaz was always giggling about something. It was part of the reason we clicked so well. No one else could stand him. Come on, imagine covering up that disaster on your head with a rainbow wig. The girls would just die, he shrieked. Keep laughing, I told him. I might just consider it. To be honest, I really was considering it. I had been planning, half seriously, on running away from home, and joining a circus didn't sound half bad. I was 16 at the time, bored to death by small-town living, and aching to leave my parents in the dust. Did I have a plan? No. But I was fueled by Home Alone-style stories of kids making it in the city with a credit card and common sense. Plus, I could do a pretty good cartwheel. Wow, half the school must be out here, Gaz observed, shaking me from my musings. I followed his gaze to the party happening near the water. He was right. Even in the fading light, there were a lot of faces I recognized. A few upperclassmen approached us when we got closer, hunched over like cartoon bodybuilders. Are you two supposed to be here? The bigger one asked. We glanced at each other. You don't know us. That's Ray Gun. I gestured towards Gaz, club president. And this is Jazzwipe, vice club president, Gaz wheezed. Lisa invited us. That's the other reason we clicked so well. Ever since we'd met, we'd been playing this game. Coming up with the dumbest fake names we could think of whenever we met new people. Whoever's cover got blown first had to buy the other one a soda. Stupid, I know, but it had got me a lot of sodas too. The guys let us pass without comment, and we merged with the crowd of kids on the beach. I was surprised at how many of them were talking about the circus. Even the bro circle had supplemented their usual conversation about girls, with the girls at the circus. You know how they are. It was very scientific. Gaz and I threw around a few more pseudonyms for fun, but most people were too drunk or preoccupied to call either of us out. Each time we saw the guys from earlier, we pretended to be looking for Lisa until they passed. I guess they were the designated guards or something. At some point I lost Gaz to the horde of swaying teens. In between songs I could hear his stupid shrieking laughter, which made me feel pretty sorry for whoever he'd made his next victim. Abandoned, I peeled off a little and sat on a piece of driftwood overlooking the water. It was really getting dark now, so much so that I didn't even notice the two girls that sat beside me until they spoke. What's your name? They said in unison, scaring me half to death. Nickel forward. I mumbled, looking helplessly between them. I noticed immediately that they were twins, long strands of black hair framed identical pale faces. Too pale, like they were wearing face paint. My eyes fixated on the frilly tutus around their waists. and the striped stockings that clung to their legs. You guys go to Garfield High? Actually, my sister and I belong to the Circus, said the one on the right. We open tomorrow night, said the one on the left. Oh yeah, everyone's talking about it. We don't get a lot of excitement around here. Must suck getting stuck with promotion, right? They looked at me strangely. Lefty spoke first. No, we wanted to come out here. We thought a party looked like fun. It's been so long since we've hung out with kids our own age. Her sister shot her a look and she shut up. Righty finished. She means that we've just been so busy. It's hard to get out much, you know? But you really should come, what did you say your name was? I'd forgotten my alias. Classic. But just before I gave myself away, I felt a hand touch down on my shoulder. This right here is the Great Forest Woods. No relation to Tiger. Gaz giggled. Sorry you ladies had to deal with him. He's real broody, isn't he? He plopped down between Lefty and me, nearly knocking her off the seat. Righty frowned, silent accusations hardening her features. No, I thought it was something else. Her gaze burned into me. Her eyes seemed bigger than before. A foreign shame entered my bloodstream, like when your mom catches you doing something wrong. For a second, that's exactly how I felt. Like a little kid, caught in a lie. I almost told her my real name, but her sister beat me to the punch. Anyway, it was really nice meeting you two. Hopefully we'll see you at the circus tomorrow. I watched them walk back up the beach, towards the main road. Gaz whistled a bit, then broke out in a fit of laughter. Usually the sound was mildly annoying, but the party was starting to thin, and the bonfire was being put out. And my friend's wild, high-pitched wails were more unnerving than anything else. If you had told me the next Olympics were going to feature competitive shark wrestling, that would have been more believable than what my parents said at breakfast the next morning. Have you seen the circus up by the mall, Daryl? My mom chirped. Yeah, me and the boys were talking about it at work yesterday. I was thinking we could go see what it's about. As a family, you know? Admission is free. That's how they were, even though I was sitting right there, slurping up cereal. They talked like I wasn't even in the room. I cleared my throat loudly, twice. You alright, Sean? I hope you're not getting sick. I'm fine, Mom. And since when are you and Dad into circuses? My real question was, since when are you and Dad into anything? They shrugged. It looks like fun. Plus a couple lovely girls stopped by the other night to give us flyers. They said it'd be very educational. My mom said. I tried not to choke on my cereal. I tried to tell myself that they'd probably just gone door to door. It wasn't like they'd sought out my house specifically. It wasn't even possible. Still, I couldn't shake the dread that crept into my fingertips and made the spoon too heavy to lift. Did you tell them anything? My dad scoffed. They're not cops, Sean. We just said that we'd love to come see their show. Your mother even gave them one of her famous cupcakes. But, no buts. We're going to have a nice family evening, and you're not getting out of it. The light in the kitchen seemed to die out, as if on cue. A stray flyer fluttered past the window. I watched it with a frown. At that point, I made up my mind that I was going to run away. For real. And if I had to go to this thing, maybe I really could take advantage of it. Even if they were just looking for someone to clean out the elephant pen. I turned back to my parents. Can I bring Gaz? They groaned loudly, which I took to mean yes. Through hours of hostage crisis level negotiation, it was agreed that Gaz and I would ride our bikes to the circus and meet my parents in the stands. Actually, his parents were going too, but they were more than happy to dump their son with us. Sometimes I felt kind of bad for him, to be honest, but he didn't seem to mind. On our way there, I told him about the girls, and got a similar story back from him. I was relieved. They'd gone door to door after all. I also told him my plan to skip town, which admittedly wasn't much of a plan. Really, I was just going to ask the ringmaster for a job after the show, and hope for the best. Like I said, I was running on movie magic. Gaz told me my plan was stupid, and then immediately offered to help. His job was to distract my parents. He was a good friend. When we arrived, the parking lot was swarming with people. The entire town must have been there. Dead leaves and flyers choked the air. The smell of cotton candy and popcorn replaced any oxygen, making me dizzy. Above us, the big top loomed, red and white stripes tapering into a sharp point at the top, with dozens of cheap carnival games scattered around it. A few dirty-looking clowns patrolled the games, handing fluffy toys with big, gloved hands. I tried to picture myself as one of them and felt sick, but still, I was determined. Gaz and I parked our bikes and walked up to the ticket master. "Names?" he said. "Midsummer Shyamalan," Gaz giggled. "And this is my buddy." But before he could invent a name for me, I interrupted him. "Josh Grant," I blurted out. I still don't know why I said it. I don't know why I played it safe. I just know that something deep inside me told me that I needed to be convincing. The ticket master nodded at me, wrote the name on a shiny ticket, and passed it through the window. Then he narrowed his eyes at my friend. "Your real name?" Gaz glared at me, then said very slowly, "Garrison Fields." We had this rule, see, that if your cover got blown, you had to give up your real name. It was supposed to be a punishment, like giving away a piece of yourself. I think about this rule a lot. I think about this moment a lot. "You're a jerk. You know that, right?" Gaz punched me in the arm as we walked into the tent. "That doesn't count. You have to earn your soda." I just nodded, trying to shake away the fog of carnival confections. We met up with my parents, and the show quickly began. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the largest circus on earth. Our members are very pleased to see your faces, but be advised, there will be audience participation." A troupe of clowns danced into the ring, breaking out into cruel laughter and honking their tiny horns. I guess the gag was that they were prisoners or slaves or something, because of the comically large shackles attached to their legs. Whenever the ringmaster approached them, they all made a big show of screaming and cowering behind each other. At one point, the ringmaster pulled out a whip and pretended to hit them with it. I flinched at the sounds of it snapping in the air, but the audience was eating it up. Even my parents were howling with laughter, slapping their thighs as they watched. I forced a chuckle from my lips, suddenly very self-conscious. Finally, the clowns retreated and were replaced by ballet dancers. I recognized the twins among them, leading the rest of the performers. Only, not everyone was in costume. In fact, most of the dancers were dressed like suburbanites, or wearing business clothes. Ages ranged from ancient to elementary schoolers, all moving together. One older woman tripped and landed face first on the floor, where she was trampled by her teammates. Gaz was doubled over in hysterics behind me. I felt sick. I kept waiting for her to get up. She looked so frail, white, and withered. One of the twins looked back at her, and she finally picked herself up. She rejoined the dance, and I tried to laugh at the way her legs bent awkwardly backwards. By the halfway point, I was rethinking my plans. Short-skirted vendors prowled the stands, offering sugary snacks. "And what's your name, cutie?" Josh Grant." A tub of cotton candy was shoved into my lap. I placed a clump of it in my mouth and almost gagged. It was stale, sour, but when I turned to complain, the vendors had already moved on. I looked around. My parents were sharing a large tub of popcorn, except they weren't really eating it. No one was really eating. Hands dug into containers and brought the contents to laughing lips, only to have them fall right out of their mouth and onto the floor. I watched Gaz grind cotton candy into his teeth, unable to stop giggling long enough to chew. My head was light, and I looked back at my own container and gasped. The pink treat was gone, replaced by a thin layer of black mud and a pile of dead leaves. I touched my fingers to my lips, and they came away black. Now I really did gag. "Dude, something's wrong." I shook Gaz by his shoulders. "I think we should ditch." But he just kept laughing, not even looking at me. "Gaz, come on. I'm being serious." Below us, a dozen or so men were eating fire, or trying to anyway. "Gaz." I shoved him, hard. His skull made a sharp thud on the wooden bench, but he just kept cackling like an idiot. Tears rolled down his face. His cheeks were red. White fingers clutched at his side, but he kept going, glued to the action. My parents were in the same state. Everyone was. I wanted to stand up and scream, "What's so funny?" But a cold fist formed in my stomach and kept me still, kept me quiet. The show continued. I have to be honest, It really was the largest circus on Earth. Thousands of people dragged themselves through various stunts and tricks, but it was as if they hadn't been trained on any of it. There were no costumes, no one was smiling. The magician wept as he cut a woman in half. No box or anything. "I'm sorry," he kept mouthing. "I'm sorry." And the smell of blood joined the tango of sugar and butter. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't watch. But a pair of clowns was guarding every exit. For some reason I felt like I was being monitored, trying to stop the wetness in my eyes. I dunked a fist into my tub of dead leaves and flung them at my mouth, allowing them to stick to my chin. I laughed at the horror in front of me, until my cheeks hurt, rocked back and forth in my seat, tried to stop looking around. The smell of urine wafted up, and I noticed the man in the seat below mine had pissed himself. Not that he seemed to mind. Finally, after hours, the ringmaster made an announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for audience participation." He held a box of shiny tickets. "When I call your ticket, come on down." The room was silent. I don't mean people stopped laughing, because they didn't, but it was like their voices simply went quiet. Holden Deere, Felicity Chambers, Gabby Days. I watched people suddenly jerk onto their feet, staggering towards the center stage with shaky, lurching steps. A parade of toddlers, or puppets. David Brown, Daryl Connors, Linda Connors. My parents stood up. I couldn't help myself. I threw my body at them, holding onto their legs like a little kid, begging them not to go. A few clowns looked in our direction, but I ignored them. "Mom, Dad, please. Please don't you get it? Something's wrong with these people. We have to go home now." But they kicked me off with a superhuman strength. I flew back into Gaz, whose face was still contorted into silent laughter. Garrison Fields. No, please, you can't." I screamed in his ear. For the smallest fraction of a second, I swear he looked at me. I'll never forget the pain in his eyes, the fear, and then he stumbled down towards the ring. Everyone did. "Josh Grant." I stood up. For a moment the world worked in slow motion. I watched my family march through the ring. A girl, one of the twins, handed my dad a clown nose. Another one was showing my mother how to dance, lazily, very stupidly. I noticed several pairs of twins doing the same to the rest of the crowd. Several pairs of the same twins. One handed Gaz a flaming baton. The ringmaster smiled up at me, then frowned as I stood motionless. His eyes seemed too big, his features too sharp. "That's not my name." I screeched at the top of my lungs. Then I ducked my head and ran through the stands, through the red and white curtains that felt coarse and dry against my skin, out into the parking lot, where I pounced on my bike and hurtled down the main road, screaming and crying and trying to remember how to breathe. I waited for my parents the rest of the night, uselessly of course. I waited to hear the sounds of cars starting up. I waited to hear familiar voices, all uselessly. Stacks of flyers were blown against my windows, face up. One night only. I screamed to break the silence. Largest circus on Earth. The next morning I pedaled back to the mall, not knowing what I was expecting. The place was deserted. No tent, no games, no ticket booth. Just rows upon rows of parked cars and overturned bicycles. A thin layer of dead leaves blanketed the ground where the big top had been. I stood there for a long time, unable to comprehend the bitter irony of it all. I had planned to join the circus, but everyone else had instead. The realization slackened my knees. A wild, hysterical giggle burst from my lips. "No." I mumbled between peals of laughter. No. I sank to the ground, shaking. This isn't happening. I don't know how long I stayed there, staring at the spot where everyone in my town had been taken. I don't know how long I waited for some sign of life. And I don't know when the laughter turned into sobs. I've wanted to tell this story for a while now, but never really wanted to bring it into the light. I would like to enlighten the masses of a story that happened to me, and has more than confirmed the supernatural for me and my father. The best way to start this story is with the beginning of that day, to catch you all up. It was Saturday morning and I was packing up my stuff from my dorm to head back home for the first time in over a month. I had missed my dad, and just wanted to hang back home for the rest of the weekend. My childhood home was about a 50-minute drive from my college, so I didn't get there until around 2 in the afternoon. My dad hadn't gotten off work yet, so I just threw my stuff on my sister's bed, plopped down, and started watching Dexter, my favorite show during that time. Notice how I said my sister's bed. That's because when I moved to college I gave my room to my brother, and his room was filthy and hot, so I chose to sleep on my sister's bed, because it was cooler and she was at my mom's for the weekend. The day goes by fast, and my dad got off around 4ish. He was very tired, so we got ready and went out for dinner. Afterwards we headed back home early, so he could get to bed. We both laid down around 10, which was early for me, so I got back to watching Dexter. I watched like 3 episodes and scrolled through social media in between episodes, until my eyes started to get heavy. Before putting my phone down, I set my alarms for church the next morning, and noticed the time was after 2, and I knew I needed to get some sleep, so I passed out immediately after. Now I'd like to pause the story to give you a layout of my father's house. When I described it to my friends, I'd like to compare it to a donut, not because it's round, but because once you enter the front door, you are in the living room, then it opens into the dining room, then the kitchen, my dad's bedroom, bathroom, brother's room, then back to the living room. So each room has 2 doors that connect to the adjacent room. By walking around my whole house, you would be walking in a circle. Because my sister moved out from my mom's, we had to renovate the dining room into her bedroom. Now that you know the importance of my home's layout, let's get to the stuff that changes how I perceive scary movies forever. I had just fallen asleep, and had woken up to a noise I can only describe as ground shattering, because that's what it sounded like was happening. I compare it to having a professional baseball player taking a bat, and swinging it over and over at the floor underneath me. I didn't know what was happening, but I was so tired, and my dad has a history of punching walls and doors, when he is having trouble with the women in his life. It sounds like my dad is an abusive man, but he's not. He never lays a hand on a woman. Just has anger issues, and takes it out on the house for some reason. So I thought he was having another episode, and went back to sleep easily with that assumption. I'd say another 20 minutes pass, and this time it was 10 times louder. It was horrible to hear, and now I was convinced it was coming from the floor underneath me. I stared blankly at the floor, while my eyes adjusted to the pitch black room around me. I was scared and angry at the same time. Part of me was scared because I thought my dad would never be able to make a noise so horrifying, and the other part of me was mad because if my dad was making this noise, I was losing sleep for his ignorant actions. And just when my eyes had adjusted, only like 30 seconds since that last banging, I hear footsteps come from my dad's room, and they are stomping on the old wooden floor very loud. For a second I thought maybe that was the noise, but trying to think rationally here was not going to bode well for me. Because just then my dad enters the room with a very angry, tired face. He begins to yell at me saying, "Son, what are you banging on?" And I knew he was serious, and it was not him making these disturbing noises. Then I replied with a very shaky voice and said, "But Dad, I thought it was you." I could feel my eyes watering up, because the fear was settling in, and my father must have seen it too. Because he just looked at me confused, and I could tell he was sorry for yelling and assuming it was me. We stared at each other emotionless and baffled for maybe 2 seconds, but felt like 20 minutes. Then, just as I finished my sentence, as if it, whatever it was, heard my father yelling and decided to retaliate with 3 more bangs that sent shivers down my spine. The sound was so demonic and horrifying. There's no denying that we both heard the horrendous noise, and its origin was right in the middle of us beneath the floor. My father looked down, and looked back up at me with a glowing pale face, and walked back to his room silently. He showed no comfort for me, and no reaction at all to the noise happening in the room where I was. He just left me as if the noise scared him so badly, it sucked all emotion from him. Left to face it myself, I slowly checked my phone and it was 3:31, and I was dead tired. Like my eyes were burning because I was so tired. I must have fallen asleep, because the next thing I knew my dad was on one knee, beside me, gently waking me up. I sat up with a jerk, because I still felt the fear from last night. My dad, with tears in his eyes, said, Son, I don't know how to put this, but you know that sound we heard last night? I shook my head, then he went on. I went down to the crawl space to see what could have made that noise underneath the dining room floor. And just to get down there, I had to get out a shovel to dig dirt up from around the door, because the house had sank over time. I also had to cut down multiple vines that had grown over the door. I crawled as close as I could to the point where the noise came from, but just as I figured there was no way any animal or person could get there, because there's only about a foot from the floor to the ground. I had thought this too, because our house sat on a hill, and when I've been down there before, you can only walk, head ducking, for like 3 feet before it gradually gets shorter until the front of the house is actually touching the ground. I could tell where my dad was going with this, and he didn't need to convince me. I had come to my conclusion once he said the door was that hard to get opened. Since the door was the only possible way to get under the house, and that no living thing could have made such a loud noise with only a foot of room to work with. My dad continued. Son, you know I've never believed in anything supernatural or spiritual, but I am completely convinced that what happened last night was something supernatural. With his face just as pale as last night, he got up and walked away. I was relieved and terrified all at once. I had been trying to tell my dad something was off about the house for years, but he always blew it off, and in a way I guess I had been too. But there was no denying what happened was real. I still asked him almost monthly to repeat the events back to me. It's my way of keeping myself from pushing it off as something imagined. But nevertheless, my father tells the story the exact same way I have for you today, but probably with less grammatical errors. I no longer try to convince people the paranormal is real. I just simply say, when something paranormal happens to you, you will know. P.S. My dad is some kind of supernatural nut now, and has done some research and believes that because of all the negative energy in the house over the years, the fighting, the divorce, drugs, and even a death happened before we owned the house, made it possible for a dark entity to latch onto it. What we heard that night was probably an entity making itself known. He used the 3 sets of 3 to support this theory, because there were 3 separate bangs, and each time it happened was in a series of 3. My dad has researched, and it's supposed to be a knock, or insult to the Holy Trinity. I do recall the sets of 3, but I guess this last part is more food for thought than anything.